Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today we're going to talk about Attorney General Barr, Russia, and firing the Inspector General. Sidney Powell, author, and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, attorney, joins me. Smithfield Foods and Leftism, and Party Like It's 1776. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
Can we talk into today's first five? I'm Debbie Georgatos. I am declaring this a virus-free show. We're going to talk about other stories. It's hard to remember, but 6 weeks ago or more, we had stories that were of monumental importance to this country and had to do with preservation of liberty, of the rule of law, and all has been consumed by the coronavirus. So today we're talking about other very, very important things also happening in America. I want to start with Attorney General Barr had an interview in which he was talking about the two things that matter a lot, and I want to remind all of us where we are on those. One is President Trump had made a decision to fire Michael Atkinson, an inspector general. And of course, immediately the left assumed there was something really nefarious ongoing and must have an investigation. He can't go firing this person. And Attorney General Barr weighed in, and I want to just share that because I think it's important to understand that just because the left complains about something being biased or bigoted doesn't mean that it is. And also, the Attorney General Barr did not have to weigh in on this at all, but he spoke last Thursday and actually said that President Trump did the right thing, firing Michael Atkinson, who was the Inspector General for the U.S. Intelligence Committee. And among the reasons that was a right decision, according to Attorney General Barr, is that Atkinson failed to follow instructions from the Department of Justice about permitting people to submit a complaint, a whistleblower complaint that was based on hearsay. The department said that's actually not the basis. That's not what, you need to have complaints that are going to be considered whistleblower to be of something that was actually witnessed by the person rather than something that was secondhand or hearsay. And then he just said this is Attorney General Barr, said Atkinson, is obliged to follow the interpretation of the Department of Justice, and he ignored it. And I do want to say, I think this whole Inspector General, the existence of Inspector Generals, is a wonderful and important thing. And I'm going to ask, we have joining us, as you heard at the beginning of the show, Sidney Powell. She may have a different view, but the role of Inspector General is a great thing. It's a good thing, but it does not mean that someone who's become Inspector General simply has a right to play good cop when they want to, or make decisions inconsistent with what the law requires. Also, Attorney General Barr, in activities we have not been talking about in weeks, but they still really matter to America. You likely recall the Durham investigation is ongoing. The U.S. Attorney Durham is looking into the entire Trump-Russia collusion hoax and trying to figure out, as Attorney General Barr said, he's not doing this investigation in order to write papers and present opinions. He is investigating to determine if crimes occurred, and if they did, to decide whether to seek prosecution. The statement that Attorney General Barr made in an interview with Laura Ingraham, which really caught a lot of people's attention, was he said, of the Durham investigation, Barr said, evidence shows that we're not dealing with just mistakes or sloppiness. A lot of people in watching and trying to observe what's happening with the FBI, the Department of Justice, the entire Trump-Russia collusion story, were critical, saying, this is a nitpicking. You're not that, this is your Monday morning quarterbacking, looking at the conduct of months and months of investigations. And Barr is trying to say this is not someone who forgot to put a period at the end of the sentence or use poor grammar. These are his words. We're not talking about just mistakes or sloppiness. He says, My own view is that the evidence shows we're not dealing with just mistakes or sloppiness, but there was something far more troubling here, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. And if people broke the law, and we can establish that with the evidence, they will be prosecuted. People, what we used to talk about just a few short weeks ago, still these stories, these issues have monumental importance from the perspective of trying to perpetuate in America a system of justice that is reliable, a rule of law that applies equally to everyone, that the notion that inside what appears to have occurred inside the FBI and the Department of Justice was an utter determination to go after the political enemy of the then incumbent administration, and even after President Trump became president, to continue going after him for political purposes. These are things that we criticize when they happen in third world countries. These are things that we criticize when they happen in nefarious instances of Germany. You think of the former Russian satellite countries and all the intrigue. These have no place in America, this kind of conduct. And the idea that John Durham is going to get to the bottom of it, I'm still very hopeful that happens. One last thing in the first 5, and then we'll turn talking to our friend Sidney Powell. Several articles out, and they are available on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop-down list of links. One article is entitled "The 13 Revelations Showing that the FBI Never Really Had a Russia Collusion Case to Begin With." And the reason I think this is so important is that we're not just looking at whether the case was mishandled and that, accusations were unjustified or that proper procedure wasn't followed. What is coming to light and being claimed by people who are following this very closely is that enough things were known that the FBI never really had a basis to start the collusion case at all. Didn't have a basis to even start the investigation that led us into the 3-year headline-filling witch hunt level attack on President Trump and his entire administration. There are actually 2 good pieces attached to on our website that you can read. They go into great detail explaining why, as people are becoming more aware of the evidence, there never was a reason. There was no basis for what the FBI chose to do in initiating an investigation of candidate Trump and then President Trump for Trump-Russia collusion. And that, my friends, is today's First 5. Well, as I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest joining us, Sidney Powell. She's joined us before. Here we are in the coronavirus shutdown, so she is joining us on camera. And I will tell you one reason I wanted to invite her on is that she has a new book out, The Conviction Machine. The book is entitled Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse. It is actually co-authored by Sidney Powell and Harvey Silverglate. And I wanted to ask Matt the Wonderful to put a picture up of the book. This is the cover up. You can order it on Amazon. In fact, on our website, if you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, under shows, list of links, this is there, the link to order on Amazon. I've ordered on Amazon. It's going to arrive tomorrow, so I also have it on my iPad so I can talk with her about it intelligently. But one reason among many I wanted to have her come on is to talk about her new book. So I believe we have Sidney Powell. Hello.
Hey, Debbie. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you could come on and join us. I know you're very busy, and my gosh, you have come up with another amazing book, eye-opening book. First book I should mention that we've talked with Sidney about on the show before, I've mentioned many times, License to Lie, also a stellar book. But this one we're going to focus on today is called Conviction Machine. And I'll get to it in one moment, but I do want to start by asking, you represent Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and I realized getting ready today, I don't even know the status of his case. Like, where do we stand with that?
Yes, we're in Wonderland as best I can tell. We have pending motions to dismiss for egregious government misconduct, and also motions to withdraw his guilty plea based on everything from government misconduct, their breach of the plea agreement when they tried to get him to lie last summer in a case against his former business partner in the Eastern District of Virginia, to the fact that his former law firm, Covington and Burling LLP, led by former Attorney General Eric Holder, is and was in an egregious conflict of interest when they continued to represent him after they had done the Foreign Agent Registration Act filing on his behalf that came quickly into the crosshairs of special counsel Robert Mueller and prosecutors Andrew Weissman and Brandon Van Grack and company. And also their multiple acts of ineffective assistance of counsel, including not telling him all the information the government disclosed. It wasn't very much, but it was very important at the last minute before his guilty plea, and allowing him to be coerced under threats of indicting his son immediately if he didn't plead right then, and not disclosing that material term to the court.
So these motions, I couldn't even write fast enough, but the one I wrote down, motion to withdraw his guilty plea, that is pending before the district court judge. I mean, he's got the motion, the judge has pending for a motion to withdraw. And then, so that would then, if that were to be granted, what is the legal impact of that? Tell us what happens then.
Well, we would be back to square one, and the government would have to decide whether to try to prosecute a case it completely made up and that exists only because of government misconduct from its very inception. In fact, one of the things I discovered only by virtue of the Inspector General's report this last December was that the FBI slipped an agent into what was supposed to have been purely a presidential briefing of then candidate Trump on August 17, 2016, long before the election. They did that specifically because General Flynn was one of 3 people that was going to be there. They wanted to spy on General Flynn, quote, assess him, end quote, gauge his mannerisms, get a baseline read on him, and collect whatever information they could collect in case they needed to interview him later as a subject, i.e. meaning if he winds up in the White House with President Trump, which is exactly what happened. And then they did that interview just 3 or 4 days after the inauguration on January 24th. But the timeline is astonishing. It's August 15. Of course, they opened Crossfire Hurricane the very end of July 2016. They immediately opened cases on Papadopoulos, Page, and Manafort because they, quote, have, connections with Russia. They don't open on Flynn then. On August 15, they have a discussion in McCabe's office about the insurance policy, and Strzok and Page text about it that very day, August 15, 2016. The next day, August 16, 2016, they open the case on Flynn. August 17, the day after that, they send the agent into the presidential briefing. They hid that information from us about the agent being in the presidential briefing, despite it was for the express purpose of laying the groundwork for the later ambush interview that McCabe set up on January 24th. The prosecutor hid that from us all along. It's only because of the Inspector General's report in December that we received that information.
It is simply breathtaking. I mean, honestly, even in the midst of this coronavirus kind of not just pandemic, but pandemic of fear, all of this is still lurking in the background and is you cannot overstate its importance in our country. And what happened to a noble public servant like Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, how the FBI was willing to, and Department of Justice willing to contort whatever it could. It's truly breathtaking. One other thing you mentioned.
It's even worse, Debbie, because right now the government is working with his former counsel at Covington and Burling to try to defeat the ineffective assistance of counsel claims, and that's why we're on hold. The next status report from the government is due on April 24th to decide if they can even set a briefing schedule yet for when to reply to our conflict of interest and ineffective assistance of counsel allegations, because Covington is now providing them whatever information Covington wants to give them from our client communications.
It's truly breathtaking. On the motion, you're asking the court to rule there was ineffective assistance of counsel. What's the outcome of that for if the court were to agree that Lieutenant General Flynn had ineffective assistance of counsel? Does that again trigger a possibility of the government having to start over in this case, or does that just bring about a dismissal?
That would bring about withdrawal of his guilty plea. The withdrawal motions were based on the government's breach of the plea agreement and then the conflict of interest and ineffective assistance of counsel. They're still pending the motion to dismiss for egregious government misconduct that covers everything from their makeup of the entire case through the Inspector General's report.
Wow. Okay. Do you have any idea if Attorney General Barr, I know he obviously knows about the case, is he attuned, as far as you know, into understanding how egregious the conduct was by the government against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn?
Well, we know that he named a special prosecutor, sort of the U.S. attorney for the District of Missouri, to work with Mr. Van Grack on this case. Ironically, Mr. Van Grack has had to be taken off the pleadings on the conflict of interest and ineffective assistance of counsel issues because he's actually a witness to all that, but he's still participating in the background, I'm sure.
Okay, I keep thinking there needs to be, I guess whatever happens, I want Lieutenant General Michael Flynn to be free, but it just seems like the best outcome for America would be a very broad-based rebuke of all that the Department of Justice did, all the way they conducted this, just a dismissal of all charges and a big fat of public apology is about what seems to be due.
Exactly, and the public is not going to have any confidence in the Department of Justice or the FBI or the court system until this case is dismissed and all the misconduct is acknowledged. And the longer the Department of Justice and FBI take to do this, the worse it looks. We still have not been able to get the original FBI 302 report of the interview conducted of him on January 24th. The prosecutor says he doesn't have it. Well, that means it's not in his back pocket. But things like that don't go missing. It's in the FBI Sentinel system, and they've never produced it. And Judge Sullivan, astonishingly, did not order them to do it. Nor do we have the January 30, 2017 memo inside the Department of Justice completely exonerating Flynn of anything Russia-related.
That is among the most amazing pieces. Okay, we can get sidetracked and talk about I could get sidetracked and talk about the Flynn case for a long time, but I do want to actually turn to your book, and we're kind of touching on some of those issues anyway. Again, the book is called Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse by you, Sidney Powell, and Harvey Silverglate. So I have to tell you that this is a topic I think we talked about a long time ago on the show when we were talking about Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. In America, people pretty much have a sense that, we have maybe not a perfect justice system, but one of the best on earth, that we have high, noble, standards set. We have rule of law applies to everyone. We have, the blindfolded Lady Liberty. But there is a growing sense in the country, recognition that the prosecutors hold tremendous power and really unaccountable power, like we were just talking a moment ago. Where is there a vehicle for the wrongs they have done to be righted? What has happened to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn and others in the course of the Mueller investigation who were just harassed and mistreated by the prosecutors? It seems like there's just no vehicle available to the people. So I actually was going to dive into several discussions, several of your chapters. But overarchingly, describe the problem you're talking about when you say federal prosecutorial abuse. What are the big pieces that you're describing are occurring today in the federal prosecutorial abuse?
I would characterize it as over-criminalization, for one thing, making up crimes. We already have too many federal laws that make things criminal that people don't even know are criminal. That's why Harvey Silverglate, my co-author, wrote 3 felonies a day several years ago, to bring people up to speed on the fact that they can go about their daily business and commit 3 felonies every day without knowing it because there's so many blooming criminal laws. And then overzealous prosecutors will even stretch those beyond the way they were intended. That happens all the time. That's why Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs were destroyed, only to be reversed by the unanimous Supreme Court 2.5 years later. That's why 4 Merrill Lynch executives went to prison on an indictment that criminalized innocent business conduct. These people can make an honest business transaction seem like a federal offense just by the way they word the indictment.
Yep.
And they also hide evidence all the time. It's called the Brady Rule. They have an obligation to disclose to the defense all the evidence they have that either contradicts their case or impeaches their witnesses or mitigates the defendant's punishment in some way. That's the rule of the Supreme Court in Brady versus Maryland, but they violate it all the time, as they did in the Merrill Lynch case I talk about in License to Lie. And we talk about that in Conviction Machine a lot. The Brady Rule needs to be made into a statutory law with penalties for its violation, because it's not followed at all, and judges are not enforcing it, as we can see by Judge Sullivan's decision back in December, not requiring the government to produce a single document, even admittedly the full documents of things they had only given us summaries of that were in fact exculpatory. And you cannot rely on summary. A summary is not evidence, and they're never accurate. I've never seen an accurate summary of a document by a prosecutor.
On the Brady rule, let's start with that, because we've talked about that many times in other cases and contexts in this particular case. And the Brady rule, which basically says if you're the prosecutor, you simply must turn over to the defense attorney, as you were just saying a moment ago, evidence that's exculpatory. What is supposed to be, in other categories, but what is supposed to be the enforcement mechanism of the Brady rule? If a prosecutor fails to turn over and the defense attorney can prove that, isn't the outcome that the prosecution is dismissed by a judge, either the trial judge or an appellate judge?
It could be, but that's extremely rare. Usually the best that happens is a new trial, and prosecutors aren't sanctioned for it at all. Judge Sullivan did hold some in contempt in the Ted Stevens case that I also discuss at length in License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, and to some extent in Conviction Machine. But that doesn't happen very often, and he sure didn't follow that in the Flynn case. So it's up to the whim of individual judges. There's no real standard practice for it except to accept the government's bald assertion that, oh, we know what our Brady obligation is and we follow it.
And so you mentioned the possible way to remedy this with the Brady rule would to make the Brady rule legislative, to have Congress pass a law, define the standard, and then define penalties for failure to comply. Is that, I don't want to mistake, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's one thing that needs to be done for sure. Judges could fix it right now by entering a very clear Brady order in each of their courtrooms and actually enforcing it. But they don't do it. And that's inexplicable to me.
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing. You obviously are an experienced federal prosecutor. I forgot, I should have looked it up, but you have filed many appeals. You write federal appeals in the criminal context. But I remember just in the brief summary, here's my law school experience. Between first and second year of law school, I interned at the U.S. Attorney's. I went to law school in Washington. I interned at the U.S. Attorney's office. And I came to realize that the judges who are trying to be, I mean, they understand their job, but they see the same prosecutors day after day, and so they develop a friendship, or at least a very much a professional respect, and they don't want to really. I mean, there's an assumption in the system that if you've gotten all the way to being prosecuted in federal court, you probably did something wrong, and so there's a tentativeness about judges deciding to really go hard in criticizing a prosecutor because you work with them every day and they're in your courtroom every day. Do you think that's valid? Do you think that's a problem?
Yes, that is a problem, and it happens all the time across the country. It's okay if you really know the prosecutor and you know their level of personal integrity, but it just doesn't work that way anymore like it used to. In fact, when I was a prosecutor, we would confess error, meaning we would agree with a court that the prosecutor in the trial had done something wrong and request a new trial for a defendant. Or we would tell the federal judge he couldn't do something if he was too pro-government, as many of them are. I haven't seen a prosecutor do that in any case that I can think of in the last 20 years. So it's become a game to win a conviction at any cost instead of seeking justice. And the Flynn case proves that in spades.
Yeah. So what about the description you have of overzealous prosecution? You know, again, I will say, I think that the kind of in the abstract or generic thought about prosecutors is prosecutors are all about enforcing existing law, and defense attorneys are all about getting people off no matter what really happened. I mean, that's a very overgeneralization, but the assumption is that prosecutors really just have a mission of fulfilling their job of enforcing law, or of understanding what laws exist, and based on facts that are presented to them, they prosecute. What they prosecute to see, are you the bank robber? And they're easy kinds of cases, you either did rob the bank or you didn't. But when you get into complex kinds of prosecutions, the kinds involved in Enron, you really need a prosecutor to have the highest sense of integrity to look at the statute, understand what it means, and then apply it to this case. So how do we get here that we have overzealous prosecutors kind of more determined to contort legal, as you said, legal things people do, contort those into crimes? How do we get here?
Well, they decided to politicize and weaponize what is supposed to be the rule of law that applies equally to everybody, regardless of station, position, political party, or anything else. And instead, they've gone about targeting individuals instead of prosecuting crimes. That's what the Enron situation was all about. Bush had directed them to ferret out the white-collar crooks. Well, what they did was they made sweetheart plea deals with the few people that had actually stolen money from Enron. There were actually only 2 of those. And then they went berserk prosecuting anybody that had anything to do with them, trying to, quote, send a message to Wall Street, end quote, that it was a crime to have done business with Enron, and destroyed Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs by piecing together parts of 2 different statutes to make a crime out of something that wasn't. That's just not, prosecutors don't get to make laws, but that's exactly what they tried to do. And then the Obama administration went even more berserk doing the same thing. They realized that they could change the law better by creative prosecutions than they could by getting anything through Congress. So they went rogue and prosecuted all kinds of people for things that weren't crimes.
So what is the answer, Sidney? I mean, you just have such a high standard of integrity, which everyone is, why so many people admire you and your writing and your advocacy. But what is the answer to getting or resolving the problem of overzealous prosecutors? I mean, you can say more training, annual training for prosecutors to remind them, by the way, you're only supposed to be here to do such and such. But if as an example right now, what we're looking at with Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, you're looking at what seems to have developed among some in the DOJ, a culture that justified overzealous prosecution, justified going after people. And how do you fix that? How do you fix that culture that is validating and encouraging this conduct?
Well, a lot of people need to be fired. I think there needs to be a review inside the Department of Justice for intentional Brady violations. The Office of Professional Responsibility needs to be completely revamped. When I talk about prosecutorial misconduct, I'm not talking about accidental overlooking something, deep in a file that should have been produced to a defendant and wasn't. I'm talking about the deliberate crafting of charges and deliberately hiding evidence from the defense that they know undermines their case. It happens in far too many cases. Even one is too many, but it happens a lot. In fact, friends of mine who are regularly defense attorneys, I'm not, I only do it on occasion, tell me that it happens regularly. That's completely unacceptable. The tone has got to be changed from the top down. People need to be fired. They need to be put in different positions to learn different things. There's a lot that can be done, and Congress needs to abolish the absolute immunity that prosecutors enjoy and make them civilly liable, just like police officers are, under nothing more than qualified immunity, particularly for their intentional and deliberate misconduct.
Can you describe what that is for our listeners? I'm so happy to be talking with you. I love that this discussion. Can you describe for our listeners what you mean about prosecutors? Because I think having qualified or absolute immunity, because I think that people think, well, the prosecutors wouldn't dare do the kind of things you're describing because they get in trouble with someone. They would get sued. They would get prosecuted. So would you describe with the current situation and what it should be?
Right now, I don't know of any prosecutor who's ever been prosecuted from as a result of his work in any case, even if he made up a crime and sent an innocent person to prison. The bar associations won't do a blooming thing about it, as we explain in License to Lie, because Bill Hodes, one of the leading legal ethics experts in the country, and I filed grievances against 3 of the prosecutors. I've never filed a grievance against anyone in my entire multi-decade career, but we did against those prosecutors, and they mysteriously evaporated or were kicked to the curb. without any serious, meaningful review at all, even though they were massive filings and documented. They're available on my website under Sources for License to Lie at licensetolie.com, which reminds me the Flynn pleadings are available at sidneypowell.com on a whole Flynn page.
I was going to ask you, go ahead, please.
Associations do nothing. The courts don't want to do anything. The Ninth Circuit has been the most aggressive in holding the government accountable, but they haven't gone far enough. And the other circuits, and the DOJ in particular, have circled the wagons to protect prosecutors instead of holding them accountable.
You know, you can see the dynamics working if you're in a prosecutor's office and you are, it's a culture of a little bit of political vengeance or political bent to it, and everyone seems to be on that same team, and you see things that aren't right, but you're not worried anything will happen to you if you speak up. You can understand why we've gotten where we are. We have people who think, why would I speak up? I'm the only one who might be commenting this way, and no one's going to back me up. I mean, I can see how it gets. I love everything you're saying, but I can see how it could get this way. And yet I step back and think, I think most Americans think what you're saying is absolutely shocking.
It is shocking. And I've come to the realization that there should not be career prosecutors. I think a maximum of 15 years is long enough for anybody to be on the public payroll. It just simply breeds entrenchment and complacency and everything that's wrong with the system.
Okay, so I mentioned I have all your chapters in the book. I can't go through all of them, but I did want to say, first of all, you write so well. License to Lie. I remember reading that thinking, if this was if it was a fiction work, I would be turning pages like this, but it was true. And the same thing's true of this book. As I said, I have an iPad I can't hold up for you, but I want to encourage our listeners to get it and to really, this is part of being a citizen activist, a citizen patriot, is you have to, when you read these kind of things and you see the way the justice system is getting off track and innocent people are prosecuted for things that aren't really crimes, this is the beginning of the demise of this glorious creation of America, what the Constitution created, this rule of law and applicable to everyone, and justice being blind. These are truly country-changing things you're talking about. One of the quick things you mentioned, over-criminalization. Is there some place where, as anyone started the project of trying to describe, maybe this is your co-author, trying to describe how we have over-criminalized? I mean, what you're talking about, and what we need to do, what has to be repealed at the federal level. Is that an ongoing project?
I don't know that anybody in Congress is really working on it, but it needs to be worked on, and there's some fairly simple fixes for a large part of it. For one thing, they could simply enact a statute that says nothing can be criminalized unless Congress has enacted a specific statute that makes it a crime. Because right now, aggressive prosecutors are taking civil regulations from the Code of Federal Regulations and putting them in conspiracy statutes and making them 5-year federal felonies and things like that, aside from piecing together parts of different statutes to make a crime out of something that isn't, or drafting an indictment in such a way as to make innocent business conduct sound like a crime. A lot of times the prosecutors don't even understand the business transaction.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting too, I think, for the average Joe American, the kinds of prosecutions that occur are very complex cases and complex definitions in federal law, what is impermissible. And I can understand why many people feel like they don't really even feel justified criticizing or questioning, but people who, like you, long-term, been a prosecutor, been outspoken. It's really a public service for you to have written this book and to be advocating really for the average Joe who can get overrun by our legal system without even, and most people assuming it's not possible in America, and you're saying not only it's possible, it's happening. So a stellar book. I want to add one more thing with you, Sidney Powell, which is, I don't know if I'll be the first one to say this, but I really hope that if Attorney General Barr, for whatever reason, no longer is Attorney General, and we're looking for somebody new, honest to goodness, I wish you could be nominated for Attorney General. And not just because you're a good writer, but the principles, the ethics, the determination to insist upon the return to the values our justice system is based on. I mean, I don't know many people as committed as you are and as outspoken and fearless and relentless. So, you know what? I'm wondering if I should just write a letter to the president and urge him to nominate you. I'm serious. You'd be a great, great attorney general. That's not a question, but I'm just telling you.
I'm honored that you would suggest that. I can only imagine the number of people in Washington, D.C. that would need laundry service if that happened.
Okay, that's a funny thing. I have to tell you, I think, in fact, we were talking long before Attorney General Barr was even nominated or even confirmed, and there was a lot of sense that, I mean, we had to get someone new in there. You know, most people concur. Jeff Sessions it wasn't the right spot for him in Washington, and so we got Attorney General Barr in. But and I'm still really hoping. I'm gonna loop back now, if I can, to John Durham. Do you have any sense, based on who you see or what you know about in Washington, do you expect indictments to come out of the Durham investigation, the Trump-Russia collusion?
There certainly should be indictments out of it. I don't know, Debbie. It has taken way too long. It has not been done the way I would have proceeded to do it, as best I can tell. But again, I'm totally on the outside. I have no idea what evidence he's looking at. I was partly encouraged by Attorney General Barr's remarks to Laura Ingraham, but then the way he kept saying, you know, if there's enough evidence of a crime, it will be prosecuted. I remain concerned. And I mean, we all know what happened. We all know the FBI signed admittedly false now FISA applications to the most egregious, intrusive court that exists in the country, a secret Star Chamber court that simply signed off on them. And I read those applications. There wasn't a shred of firsthand information of wrongdoing in a single one of them.
Yeah, I've had many people making the same comment, and I've had it myself, and I'm not nearly the experienced prosecutor that you are, but I don't understand why it's taking quite this long. And I know everyone talks about, well, you got to go ahead and you got to dot every I and cross every T. But at some point, I think people begin to lose a little of faith in the justice system because, as you're saying, many Americans have been following the FISA court application, the absurd level of the reason that the FBI should have known the entire dossier was just simply unreliable creative writing, and certainly not sufficient seriousness and legitimacy to be the basis to be seeking warrants to spy on Americans from the FISA court, and yet it's taking so long. I'm concerned too. I'm very, very concerned too.
Well, their declination of the prosecution of Andrew McCabe, which was referred criminally by the Inspector General, completely invalidates the pursuit of any prosecution of General Flynn. McCabe was under oath. He knew exactly why he was being investigated. He had had the benefit of counsel. I don't know whether counsel was with him for the interview or not, but he had certainly consulted counsel at length before the interviews, and his interviews were recorded. None of that existed for General Flynn, who was interviewed in a drive-by ambush, and we've got evidence now that the government had produced to his prior counsel, but they didn't use it, that the agents schemed and planned at the highest level of the FBI to interview him in such a way that he would not even know he was the subject of the interview. Not only did they not warn him of his rights, but he did not even know he was the subject of the interview.
I thought I understood. He thought it was a friendly interview, right? He thought it was with the Trump administration, and he's with the Trump administration.
Right. With friends that had been in the White House. One of the agents had been in the White House a couple of days before on a training mission. McCabe said he just wanted to send a couple of agents over to close up the issue. It was supposedly, just no big deal, all done. White House counsel not involved, no need for any counsel, according to McCabe. And they don't record it. Their notes don't match the 302s. The 302s were altered and revised until McCabe signed off on them after Flynn left the White House. Everything in the Flynn case was done wrong. There isn't a single aspect of the case that was in which they applied the rules, protocols, or norms. And to continue with this prosecution now in its third year is an absolute outrage, not to mention an incredible waste of taxpayer dollars and resources.
Sidney Powell, I am so glad on behalf of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn that you are representing him. Honestly, across America, when the news came out that you were going to take over his representation, so many people were cheering you on because they realized he had found a fighter, a lawyer who's a fighter. And I'm so gratefully representing him. Also, I'll mention again for our listeners, the new book out by Sidney Powell and co-author Harvey Silverglate, Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse. Yeah, there's a picture of it. Really a great read. And I thank you for writing it. You're bringing your wealth of knowledge and your passion for the justice system. It's a gift to America. So Sidney Powell, it's great talking with you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate it.
Okay, folks, I get that book, get it out there, and understand it so you can tell your friends. That, my friends, was an interview today with Sidney Powell. So glad we got to have her join us. I have two other stories I want to try to hit very, very quickly. One I want to hit is the Smithfield Foods Company, and I just want to touch on this point. Many of you probably think, I heard that name, Smithfield Foods, something's going on with them. Okay, they are a food company. They have a pork manufacturing plant that was closed down due to the high number of COVID-19 virus employees who had contracted COVID-19. So they had to shut it down, and they are cooperating and shutting down. They're responding to the government request to do that. But I want to raise something because it ties into what we've been talking about in terms of dealing with China and dealing with this virus and dealing with getting America back on track. Smithfield Foods was purchased. It is not an American-owned company. It's functioning in America, but it is not an American-owned company any longer. I think it was 2013. It was purchased by the Chinese. It's not by the Chinese Communist Party precisely, but to be very clear, any entity coming out of the country of China purchasing businesses in America, any company is completely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party may not be the named purchaser of the Smithfield Foods Company, but they are, in fact, the force behind. They really are the owner of Smithfield Foods. So you had, in the era of Obama, the love of, building the international globalist. Oh, sure, it's really swell. China comes over here. They buy companies. We're also, working beautifully together. International trade is a beautiful thing, blah, blah. I am not blaming the Chinese people. And in fact, I'm not even blaming the Chinese employees of Smithfield Foods. I am saying that among the many things we've got to learn moving forward in dealing with COVID-19, in dealing with getting to the bottom of how the coronavirus got started in China, understanding, was it really just the wet markets and the bizarre food they eat? Was there some role at all of the Chinese bioweapons plants? What was the COVID virus created in a bioweapons facility? Was it involuntarily and mistakenly released? Was it, as some fear, intentionally released? Many, many questions float around China's conduct. And the idea in our country that one thing we can do moving forward is to distance ourselves, to back off from, to sever the connection between the Chinese Communist Party and businesses functioning here in America. We have this Smithfield Foods, obviously huge food chain threat. You have the Chinese Communist Party, owner essentially of Smithfield Foods, now a massive COVID-19 problem, a lot of concern about the safety of the meat moving through our factories, meat moving through the markets in America. You have the Chinese owned Smithfield Foods with a massive problem with COVID-19 in a factory in America. In fact, I think it was South Dakota. And back in 2013, the Obama administration thought this was the swellest thing ever, to have communist the communist China purchasing companies in America. And there's also just this concern, the broader concern to remind all of us about that leftism in this country has been a problem to a great degree in getting us to where we are. Leftists are this close to how the Chinese Communist government thinks. leftists in our country massively taken over. The Democrat Party, the leftist movement in this country, massively taken over by socialism. Democrat socialist used to be something embarrassing to say that you really wouldn't want to admit in public because everyone would think you're an enemy. And now it's a trendy thing to say. The Democrat Party's platform, very, very similar to a socialist platform. The Communist Party in America, the Socialist Party of America sees the Democrat Party as their buddies, as their ideological allies. Communism and socialism are kissing cousins. They're not this, as leftists will try to say, entirely different thing. We're not communists, we're just socialists. There's a friendliness, a willingness to accept leftist ideas in today's Democrat Party that makes them unable to discern the danger of having things like the Chinese Communist Party purchasing Smithfield foods, functioning in our country, having the Chinese Communist Party, therefore, having a direct role in food production in America. In addition to the changes that will come to America, because we're going to stop, I hope, having the majority of our medications manufactured in China, we're going to pull back and have medications for Americans produced in America, and maybe in other countries we have a friendlier view toward America, but bringing back manufacturing of our medications in this country and doing what we can legally, and it'd probably take a bunch of lawyers to figure it out, to begin to extract American companies from being owned by Chinese interests, Chinese Communist Party. We do not need to be doing this to our country. And we do not need to be acting as though we simply must assume that all the players on the international stage have all the same goodwill, integrity, standards that America has. In this time of needing to preserve America, to protect America, to pull away from leftist forces that were harming America, getting companies like Smithfield Foods back into American ownership. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it needs to happen. We need to not let the left get away with trying to distance themselves from the damage caused to America by our friendliness and our willingness to continue to have Chinese Communist Party and entities purchasing companies in America. We can pull back from that. One last quick thing I'm going to wrap up the show today with. I want to hit one other very quick story. I said it was a coronavirus-free show, and it was until this last very segment. But I do want to mention something. On our website, americacanwetalk.org, in addition to subscribing to the newsletter, which I urge you to do, hit subscribe on the homepage. You can subscribe to our once weekly newsletter. It's a great newsletter. It comes out every Friday. I never sell the list. I don't share the list. It's just for my use and keeping in touch with you, my just precious listeners and friends. But on that website, America, you can also read an article by a guy I just think is one of the most brilliant writers in America. His name is Daniel Horowitz, and he writes at the Conservative Review. And he's got a piece out called "It's Time for Revolt Against Intolerable and Indefensible Tyranny." And he ends the article with the phrase that I took, I named this segment, "Party Like It's 1776. People, we have to recognize that the left is using the coronavirus scare, using the coronavirus, and it's a real thing, but using it to begin to take away our freedom. You heard it in the show a couple of days ago. We had Congressman Heiss talking about the loss of freedom in this country, where we have more and more people just surrendering to local entities, mayors, county government, state orders that are freezing us in place in our homes. Freedom, we can't move about as we'd like to. We're not allowed to leave our homes unless it's deemed by the government for an essential purpose. We can't have our businesses running unless the government says it's essential. We had an initial shock reaction to the coronavirus, and we chose a course we're now trying to undo. But we have to recognize and be vigilant to see the left will always, always, always use every crisis to seize power, to expand power, to justify tamping down on freedom. This great article by Daniel Horowitz is basically talking about, we are seeing astonishing level of tyranny and the taking away of freedom right in front of our eyes in this country, all done with the notion we're just trying to protect. We're just trying to help. We're trying to keep you safe. This is why we are handcuffing a dad in a massive park, and he's the only one there besides his 8 or 6-year-old daughter playing t-ball, and the dad was stopped and handcuffed because he's violating the can't leave your house unless it's essential. There's nobody else there. He's not spreading coronavirus, if he even has it, to anyone. But the stories, I did a litany of them. I think it was last Thursday. I've been talking about them on this show. You should be reading them. There are more and more and more and more stories, not just of individual abuses of power by police officers and mayors. We had Easter Sunday. We had mayors and governors around this country telling people they couldn't go to church on Easter Sunday, even if they sat in their car in a drive-in and couldn't even touch the person next to them in the next car. They were copying license plates and fining people. Mississippi had fining $500 a person for showing up at Easter Sunday in your car. You can say all this is justified or explicable because of the virus and the fear of the virus. But understand, there are leftists who always think that the standard they set today, the tamping down on freedom, the restrictions of freedom, become the norm for what is permissible. As Congressman Heiss said a couple days ago, as I've been saying on this show, we're going to have other viruses. We're going to have coronavirus come back, apparently, in May, in the fall, and maybe every year or seasonally, as Dr. Fauci has been saying. We can't start to say every time there's a crisis, and even a genuine crisis, that we suspend more and more freedom. We surrender more and more freedom. We cower in our homes waiting to be told if we're allowed to walk our dog 3 times a day. The stories that you are reading, they are just isolated cases, and the stories I've recounted for you, the stories you can read. But the broader picture is the changing in the whole sense of the culture of liberty in America, the whole notion of what liberty in a country means. Liberty means, it includes the idea that you have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, meaning you're allowed to do what you want, unless you are harming others or breaking a law. And that means you're allowed to go for a walk with your dog 6 times a day. You're allowed to be in a park. You're allowed to run a business unless your business is an illegal business. To have a temporary suspension of freedom because of the coronavirus was maybe okay in the first, 2, 3, 4 weeks. But recognize, if the experts are telling us this virus is going to go on and on and on and on and on, and nobody's talking about, wait a minute, how much freedom do you get to take away from the people in response to this virus? We are unknowingly, blindly submitting to the taking away of the culture of liberty in America. Be alert to it now. Read Daniel Horowitz's article. It's on our website, americacanwetalk.org. In your communities, challenge your local authorities. Horowitz has, by the way, a list of a bunch of things he's suggesting we do, such as American citizens subject to these orders that we don't like very well. We ought to say, all top government officials, you don't get paid until this is over, till the shutdown's over. State taxes should be suspended. We have the state of Texas story out today talking about might have to raise property taxes in response to coronavirus. No. And if they're shutting down your freedom, they don't get to raise your taxes at the same time. Other Horowitz suggestions: all non-essential government workers should have their salaries and hours cut back 30% for every week while all of this goes on. County councilmen, state legislatures must permanently strip executives of emergency powers beyond 24 hours without consent from the legislative body. And this leads me to a closing of today's show, a quick story I wanted to update. I think it was all the way from last Thursday. I think it was last Thursday I was telling you about in Dallas County, we have our governing bodies called the County Commissioners Court. And so it's 5 people. We have the head of the County Commissioners Court, highest executive in the county, and his title is county judge. In Dallas, Texas, we have the county judge being the one waving around and showing at a press conference the false data created by the COVID Act Now people who turn out to be leftist Hillary Clinton supporters who made massively exaggerated estimates of how many people would be sick, would be hospitalized, would require ICU, and would die from coronavirus. And based on that, in Dallas County, that data was turned out to be grotesquely exaggerated. We had everything shut down in Dallas County, can't leave your home. You know, you can get stopped by the police and asked where you're going. Is this an essential trip? You're only supposed to be going to the grocery store if it's essential. You're only supposed to be going out for doctor's appointments, picking up medications, or the grocery store. You have, I mean, and literally people are being hassled. And so you have this county judge in Dallas who had floated the idea, the order right now in Dallas is through April 30th. He floated the idea, let's push it to May 20th. Last Thursday, when I was telling you this story, I was telling you about how there was ongoing, at the time we were talking, a hearing in which the other county commissioners, and Dallas is run by Democrats. We have one Republican on the county commissioners court, but that one Republican and one of the Democrats was saying, you know, county judge, Mr. Chief Executive, we don't really think you ought to have unilateral power to continue to just announce by order that you're continuing the shutdown of Dallas. We think before you issue any more orders, and he's behaved badly with respect to this, the order that is in place already, but you have the county commissioner saying, we think we should have a hearing, like all of us, at least all 5 of the county commissioners, should get to hear the issue, understand the evidence before we extend the shutdown order from April 30th to some future date. That you, county judge, should not have exclusive executive authority. The county judge fought against that. He was saying, no, 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 it's an emergency. I may not have time. I can't make time to sit down. And these are, I'm paraphrasing his words. I can't make time to sit down with the whole county commissioners court and hold a whole big hearing. I have to have absolute authority. I can issue orders without even having to consult the other people on the county commissioners court. So the end of the story I didn't know when I told you the story last week was there was actually a vote in the county commissioners court that the majority commissioners prevailed on the executive, the county judge, and said, you know what, actually, no, you're not actually a little dictator. You're not an emperor. You at the very least, have to have a hearing of the other members on the county commissioners court. We're not going to just have the, rule by executive fiat by our county judge. That was a little bit of a long-winded story. And if you listen to this, any other place in America besides Dallas, it may seem too localized. But the reason I tell it is because this kind of thinking is expanding in this country. It's why I urge you to read the piece by Daniel Horowitz and recognize what you can do. Because the kind of thinking that says, I'm in charge and I don't really have to listen to these ridiculous people trying to complain about it. I don't even have to listen to the other 4 members of the county commissioners court. It's an emergency. I have absolute power. This mindset is spreading among leftists in this country. It is fomented in part by fear, genuine fear about the virus, and some citizens who feel extreme fear and want there to be a little emperor in their county. But it's also a change in the very culture of government we agreed to as a country. We don't have little emperors in counties and cities and states around this country taking away freedom with an indeterminate length of time. Based on this virus or any other threat, we have to recognize we are watching the frittering away, the pecking away, the hacking away at freedom, and stand up now and point it out to your local officials. Don't wait until there's a really, really big problem in this country. Stand up for freedom now. And my friends, I'm probably way past time. I'm going to turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today on this show matter to you. So to start with, today's show, we talked about Attorney General Barr, Russia, and firing the Inspector General. Attorney General Barr's recent interview comments about Barr, Durham, and the Inspector General were staggeringly unambiguous. What Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton campaign did to Trump, the whole Trump-Russia collusion farce, greatest travesty in American history. Those are Barr's words. Not a matter of mistakes or sloppiness. No basis for the Russia collusion investigation ever. These are huge things. He's acknowledging massive corruption inside the FBI and DOJ. President Trump was right to fire. This is Barr saying this. President Trump was right to fire Inspector General Atkinson. He acted in defiance of DOJ direction and without legal authority in order to set up the impeachment. This is why so many Americans are suspicious of the timing and the severity of the pandemic shutdown. The deep state operatives of the Obama era have shown they will stop at nothing in their efforts to get rid of Trump. Nothing. On the Smithfield Foods story and leftism, Smithfield Foods is one of America's top meat producers, currently shut down in South Dakota over the COVID-19 illness among workers, a serious food supply issue. Smithfield Foods is owned by WH Group, which is controlled by the Communist Chinese Communist Party. This WH Group acquired Smithfield Foods in 2013 during the Obama administration. Nothing inherently wrong with Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party is the enemy of freedom and enemy of America. Only leftists like Obama and his deep state believe that the CCP is not an enemy. Only leftists like Obama think it's okay to have the CCP own the food supply in the USA. Time to say no to CCP control of any American companies. And finally, the title I borrowed from Daniel Horowitz, Party Like It's 1776, Americans had better reclaim their heritage of freedom or risk losing it. Consent to loss of freedom must be temporary, highly conditional. Governors, mayors, county executives have gone tyrannical and abusive, using the excuse of protecting the public health to go far past what is necessary and rational. 1776 captures the eternal spirit of America, not 2020s cowering in shelters. Civil disobedience must be on the table if politicians don't or won't regain humility and respect for American freedoms. South Dakota's governor, I didn't even get to how great she's been on this show. I have other shows. South Dakota's governor, Noem, should be the model and the rule. Freedoms intact. Exceptions should be rare and exceptionally justified. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, right here on America Can We Talk. Tune in, do all the things in social media. You know what they are. Support this show. I would so appreciate your supporting this show. And tune in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to this show, America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear